Welcome back. Hope everybody's refreshed and full of energy after lunch and have made some more connections through the time that we had for networking, and there's plenty of opportunity to continue those conversations later throughout the day and in the evening tonight at the reception. So welcome to this session. My name's Lauren Stafford. I work for a company called Technology Exchange, and we bring together companies that are servicing the mining industry and driving technology-enabled innovation into mining. It's my great pleasure to be here chairing the next few sessions in this room for the next couple of hours, and it's amazing to see the incredible interest in this particular session. Just a few reminders. You know where the exits are. Just make sure that your phones are turned off. We are in the spirit of Dr. Anna Black's message this morning, giving something a go today in participating in the first ever execution of this particular session as a workshop. So I'd like to introduce to you our facilitators just now. Today we've got Kelly and Jaksha from Melbourne, who will be facilitating our workshop today. Kelly Benson, who's nearest to me, is the tech lead at OFS and has over 18 years development experience. She completed a degree in computer science software development and has worked in Perth, Melbourne, London and Sydney as a developer, and in 2017 spent 4 months in Pune, India, training graduates for ThoughtWorks. One of the things she loves most about being a programmer is the variety of being able to work with large and small companies on projects, from small phone apps to complex real-time systems and building things in a number of languages and tech stacks. She has experience in all aspects of the development lifecycle, a love of agile, and enjoys teaching and sharing good development practices with others. Thank you, Kelly, for facilitating this session for us today. And Jaksha Shah, her partner in crime, is a senior consultant at ThoughtWorks and has over 7 years of industry experience. She has a diverse experience in 5 countries, performing different roles, also worked in Pune, Sydney, Singapore, Melbourne, Brisbane and Auckland. She has a strong background in agile methodology and lean ways of working, and is passionate about solving client problems and empowering them to deliver them deliver them for value. While not working or travelling, she loves painting in her free time. Thanks, Jaksha, for facilitating for us today. So one of the stated objectives of the Hopper Down Under is to develop the community, and that's exactly what we've got here in this room. We've got connections that we're going to be able to leverage beyond this next 1 hour in order to be able to develop our expertise and our skill at furthering our careers. So we're going to get into it very, very quickly because it's a fairly packed agenda. But as we work through the session today, please make sure that you make those connections so that you can continue this development beyond this session in the weeks, months, years to come. Over to you guys.
Okay, so thank you for introducing us, Lauren. These are Twitter handles if you want to trade. So today we are going to talk about why don't women ask and how to bridge the gender pay gap. And we're going to try and run a workshop. It's going to be quite packed in terms of timings. So the intent is just give you a teaser, and then you can go home and work on some of these things if you don't get a chance to work today. And considering the crowd, what I'm going to encourage is try and work in groups on your tables, like groups of 3 or 2 or 4, whatever works for your table. And then we'll try and have discussions on the tables and get people to present back. Okay, so this is kind of the agenda, what we're going to try and do. Basically understanding what a review process might be. Every organization has a different, based on small, large, or an enterprise. Do some form of a self-assessment. And then what does it mean for gathering feedback? What does it mean for market analysis? And what does it mean for putting it all together in the end? And how do you tell a story whenever you're going for a review process? So just a bit of context. So we've done this talk before, and we've done it in a form that covers all 3 aspects. So who's responsible for change? If you look at the current stats in the industry, we all know there's a gender pay gap that exists in the market. And the way it's going to take 100 years to bridge it. So a century is not good enough for us to bridge the gender pay gap. So what we're trying to see is from our perspective, there are 3 areas of improvement. One is the industry itself and the organizations, they need to change. The other one is some of you in the room might be managers or in the management positions. What are the forms of things you can do? Examples being unconscious bias or supporting flexible working or supporting different roles as your life changes come along for women. And the last aspect we feel as individuals we have it in our control is what you could do as an individual. So we're going to try and focus on the last aspect in the form of a workshop, but we are writing an article which will publish a series covering all the 3 areas. So without any further ado, let's get into the first part of the activity. So everyone has some stationery, pens, pads, everything on the table. Identify your groups, and I'll try and explain the activity once it is there. So what do we mean by understanding the review process? Before we start, how many of you are working over here? Okay, most of you. And how many of you are masters or uni students or, okay, we've got a good mix. Okay, cool. So on the table, divide yourselves into smaller groups, and I'll explain the first part of activity. Now, considering most of you are working, and some of you are new to the industry, what I want you to think is, what is your understanding of your current review process? What do you know in terms of your expectations? What do you know if you have any objectives or goals to hit? Are you aware of how they measure you? How does your manager or your organization or your startup is going to measure you? And if you don't know this, what are the vague questions you have and whom are you going to ask? So what you're going to try and do is take 5 minutes and start writing some of these things in a smaller group so you can discuss if you want to. And then after the 5 minutes, we'll have a group discussion around this.
Make sure you share amongst each other, and if you're someone who hasn't gone through a review process or doesn't know what it is, then talk to the others and try and figure out what does that process kind of look like.
And we'll walk around, so if you have any questions for us, we can come and talk. So just want to do some quick questions. Raise of hands if you felt you knew your review process very well. Okay, cool. So you were able to map what are the steps involved in your review process and what's expected out of you and what are your objectives and everything. Cool. And what about the rest of the crew? What was the challenge? Yeah. Because the key thing over here is quite often one of the reasons.
Could I just ask a quite clarifying question?
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to know, is it content of your job that you know very well in terms of the review process, or career path development, like your own career development?
This is more on the content of your job.
The content of your job.
The content of your job.
But again, that's a really...
Interesting to know the answer, though, how many people would say about their own career development? What would be
Yeah.
the difference?
Yeah, and ideally, it's a art to match the two, but at least knowing the content of your job will sometimes help influence your career aspirations, or not influence your career aspirations, saying this is not what I want to do.
But I think also that's a really good question, because a lot of the time when you are going for a review process, is it a performance review? Is it a pay review? Are you talking about your career aspirations? A lot of the time it can be very vague, and that also forms part of the how the hell do I know what to prepare if I don't know what I'm going in there for? So just from my experience, I've found it very vague as to what is this even for?
And that's the caveat. Like, one of the reasons we feel, based on the research we've done on this material, is people just don't know what is the process and how to prepare for it. And most of us are trying to, including me, I've been through that, are trying to wing it to say, oh, okay, this is going to happen every year. Let me just try and wing it to say what all achievements I've done and just go and talk about it. And hopefully I'll get everything what I wanted at the end of it. And that's why we started thinking about, let's have a structured approach to this a little bit. Any other things people want to share? What was your reflection when you were trying to map down the current process of your, or what is your understanding of your review process?
At my job, the sort of review process is sort of treated as like more of a bureaucratic thing that just has to be done. So you spend
Yeah.
This doesn't seem to be much of a push to actually like evaluate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And is this have you spoken about this with your manager or someone in the organization?
Not really. I'm pretty new. I don't want to
Yeah.
the status quo just yet.
Yeah. And that's another thing, what do you feel? There's this thing where we don't want to question the process and we don't want to push the boundaries. And we never try to challenge ourselves. Why are we not trying to do that? It's like, yeah, we've got a job, but no one's going to fire you for asking those questions. Yeah. Hopefully, most of the organizations in Australia. But that's how I look at it, like organizations want smart people. Okay, we don't have much time, so we're going to quickly move to the next one if people are happy to move to the next part of this.
Okay, so I guess the next part is we've kind of looked at the process and what the process is, but now we need to look at ourselves and think about what are the things that we've achieved and what kind of information can we gather about ourselves that we can put into this review process. So part of what we're doing is we're going to go through the steps of reflection, and then the outcome is we put it all together as something that we can put forward in our review process. So for our activity for self-assessment is we're going to think about what are the expectations of your role? Are you even clear on what those are? So sometimes you may have KPIs or a list of expectations that you're supposed to meet. And if you're not meeting these expectations, then be honest with yourself, you know, can I admit that I'm not meeting them? And if not, why not? So do I need more support? Do I need training? Are there opportunities that I'm missing out on? And if I'm missing them, then how should I be approaching those? Who can I talk to make sure that those things happen? So again, if we can spend maybe 4 or 5 minutes just writing down those things, discussing in your groups about them, and then we'll come back and we'll do some more questions. Hi everyone. From the sounds of things, there's a lot of good conversations going on because it's a very loud room. So who has thought about these things more than once a year when they have their reviews? Who thinks about their kind of KPIs, expectations, like regularly every month? Well, we've got a couple. So I think one good thing to point out is that with this self-assessment and with the next section, which is around gathering feedback, that we should be doing these things continually because they're a lot more powerful that way. If you, say, think about your, are you meeting expectations once a year, then that's not very often, there's not much time for, you know, reflection and making changes or actioning on goals. So it's kind of like having a more agile process. So anyone who knows much about agile development is part of the power of that is small iterations, fast feedback. So if you're doing something more often, you get a lot better result. So, Jaksha, we need to skip to the next slide. Thank you. So our next section is gathering feedback. So again, what we're going to do is take a few minutes to think about gathering feedback. Who do you ask for feedback? So it shouldn't be just your manager. It should be the people around you that you work with, potentially clients or stakeholders if you have other people outside of your team that you work with. So how often are you asking them for feedback and what kind of things are you asking them? So also think about open and closed questions. So open questions are a lot more, give people a lot more room to answer. So closed questions are very direct. Did I do this thing well? Whereas an open question would be like, over the last month I've worked on this, how do you think I went and what kind of things do you think I could improve on? So have a think about that and also think about, again, how often should I be doing this and what kinds of ways are there of giving feedback? So should I be doing this face-to-face? Should I be sending an email and asking for feedback? There are some fun things, so doing, what's it called, Jaksha, when you do around the table?
Speed feedback?
Oh, speed feedback. Yes, it's almost like speed dating. It's super awkward at first, but it's great. So just spend, again, 4 or 5 minutes just talking about your feedback and what kind of things you should be asking for and can be asking for. All right, thanks everyone. Who believes that they're good at asking for feedback? Oh, so few hands. Who Who thinks they're good at asking for constructive feedback? Even less. So what are some of the questions, who would like to share that they kind of ask for or think are good questions for feedback?
So normally I ask for like, this is what my goal is, and I'm looking forward for something which I can improve on to reach that goal, and then they kind of give me constructive feedback, let me know where I want to meet and what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, and that's really good. So looking for something that you can have that is very practical and you can take actions out of, as opposed to the, I've got a review coming up, can you tell me I did good things? So that is a lot more powerful. And if you're asking for it early on and often, then that's something that when you come to putting together your review, you can say, I got this feedback, here's what I did, here's what I've learned from that. And that's a lot more powerful than just, asking for someone for something at the end of the year and they're like, yeah, she did good. So when we come to gathering feedback, who thinks they're good at giving feedback? Again, and I think that's something that's just as important, that you can't. It's all right to go and ask for feedback, but this should be a two-way conversation. You should be sharing feedback back the other way, and I think the better you get at giving feedback and giving constructive and thoughtful feedback, the better that you'll get at receiving it as well. So if somebody does have something more constructive for you, you can think about it and objectively go, okay, maybe I do need to work on that, as opposed to thinking like, oh, why are they saying that? Like, they're just being mean. So does anybody have any questions around feedback or anything else they'd like to share? Yeah, that's a really good thing to do, to take note of things that people are saying about other people and sharing that. Thank you. Shall we move on to the next section,
Cool.
Jaksha?
So the next bit, one of the key things to think about when you're going and preparing for a review process is market analysis. What's being offered in the market? I never did this. I just focused on where I am and where I want to be, and I don't care what the market does. However, that plays a key role as you grow, because that way it's less about you challenging and pushing the boundaries of your organization, as we were talking in the beginning. It is more around you showing what the market is offering and where you want to be. So who over here looks up what's being offered for similar roles in the market outside before going for your review process? Cool. So this is something to try in your next review, to try and see, okay, I'm a senior dev in this company, or I'm a senior business analyst. What is being offered for a senior business analyst in the market? And don't collect only one website. We've listed a few websites over here. Try and scan through some extra websites to collect that data. And so you get an average or range, and then you can have a conversation around it. How many of you have like salaries published in your organization? What sort of thing do they publish in your organization?
We have an enterprise bargaining agreement, so it has a salary scale for professional and academic staff members at the university.
Yeah. Okay. Was everyone able to hear that? Okay. Do you want to speak up a little bit?
Sorry, it's called an enterprise bargaining agreement, and it's a published agreement for all employees by professional, academic, and non-professional streams for the university I work at. So it's a very transparent way of evaluating pay grades and salary.
Any other organization have any form of transparency around salaries?
Yeah, we have salary reference tables, so you can see at the engineering level and management level the different
Yeah.
scales that you can see.
And do you use that in your conversation?
Yeah, I haven't personally because I'm a graduate, but yeah, you can use it to argue your position there, I guess, and where you sit in that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I did not use it in the early days of my career, but as I started growing, my organization publishes for professional consultants, not for operational roles, but all the PS roles, or they call it professional consulting roles. They publish based on your grades and your levels, what are the salary ranges, and even they publish what's the gender pay gap in each range. And you can use that data to frame your conversation to say, this is what is being offered internally, this is what is being offered externally, and this is where I am. and these are the reasons I want to move from here to here. And then you build a story, like you understand the process, you've done your self-assessment, and the key thing, what I've noticed is, and I don't know how many of you go with a number in your mind to go for your salary review? Yeah? Because I never went in the beginning, I just didn't know what to ask. And that's where I started realizing, if I don't ask what I want, no one's going to give me what I want, because they're not going to know what I want.
And I think that's something that if you read up on the gender pay gap, that is a big contributor and the name of our talk is Women Just Don't Ask. And there's this, it's partly a cultural thing, there's various other reasons, but it's around that there's an expectation of, oh, these people are reviewing me, they know what I'm worth, so they'll give me what I'm worth. And that's not always going to be the case.
Talking about that, if you have a number in your mind and someone is not prepared to give you that number, sometimes you kind of have to make your mind up to say, no, I'm waiting.
Is it enough? Yeah, that's really important. So part of this is recognizing that this is an opportunity to negotiate, and negotiation is another skill that in general women aren't taught. And it's something to note that negotiation, we have, with this word, we have this picture in our head of like some really aggressive, like toing and froing and fighting over something. And it doesn't have to be like that. So that's part of, if you've done your data, done your research, got your data and put it all together, then you have a really strong case to say, this is why I'm worth this much, as opposed to saying I'm worth this much. And then when they ask why, you're like, because everyone else is getting that much. You know, that's not a strong enough case. Whereas if you can say, well, I've done these things, I've learnt these things, this is the feedback I'm getting, then that's a lot stronger case.
Look up the book, How to Get to Yes, or look up the YouTube videos, How to Get to Yes. I forget the name of the guy. I'll look it up while Kelly does her talk, but there is How to Get to Yes, because that's something, so we did this talk internally, and our managing director told us that everyone should read that book, How to Get to Yes.
Mm-hmm. And another good book is it Nice Girls Don't Ask?
Yep.
So very similar, and it's all about that skill of negotiation and different ways that you can approach it to be able to negotiate with your own style.
Yep. Okay, cool. So what I would want you to do is, if you think this is valuable in your next review, do a bit of a data analysis of what's offered in the market, what's offered internally, and how would you do? That's the activity which was, but I think considering time, we can go to the next part of this. Unless anyone has questions around this area, around market analysis or anything. Okay, cool.
Okay, so now we've kind of looked at our feedback, we've looked at self-assessment, we've got a good idea of what our process looks like, so it's all about putting it together. So in this activity, look at what you've outlined in the previous things and how can that create a story of what you've achieved over the last year and outline your goals for the next year. So think of what you're going to ask in regards to pay or it may not just be pay that you're looking for, you may need support and training, you may want to be looking at a role change, you may want to be looking at getting new responsibilities, that kind of thing. So these are all the kinds of things that you can raise in these. So also you can kind of get creative. So what I like to do is I put together a slide deck and I have usually an excellent picture of myself at the start, that kind of thing. Jaksha, if you were to skip to the next one. So here's what I do. So you can see I kind of start with a summary of this is what I've achieved over the last year, this is what I've enjoyed doing, what I'd like to see myself doing more of. And then we have a breakdown of the different clients that I worked with, how long I was there, the feedback I got from them, so little bubbles of things. And then also any other kind of extracurricular or kind of shout outs, things that people have said about you. Also, another thing you can add is community kind of events that you go to. Do you go to meetups? All these things kind of feed back into your passion and motivation for what you do, which are always positives to have.
So for me, I don't have such pretty pictures, but what I've got is numbers. I was focusing on numbers and what matters in my organization. As Kelly said, at ThoughtWorks, it's not just about doing your day job and your client work, it's more about what you go above and beyond. And quite often, many organizations have these unspoken expectations, which they're not clear. So what I've done was, what I've done beyond my client, what I've done at my client, what I've done regardless, let it be client or not, how flexible I've been, and put some stats around it. And while I'm not on project, what am I doing? And what sort of feedback I'm getting from people. So I've tried to put all that together on a slide deck and tell a story. So when I'm trying to talk to my manager, it's not about I'm trying to say, this is what I want, and that this is the number I want, and this is what everyone's getting. It's more about where have I started, what's the feedback I've got, what work I've done at my clients, what I've done beyond my clients, what sort of things which I look in my self-reflection for improvements, and then giving them some numbers to say, look, these are some stats to say I'm not just talking for the heck of it. There are some stats to support what I'm trying to claim over here.
And another thing what I like to do is I like to send this out to my managers prior to my meeting so that they've got a clear idea of what I'm asking for when I walk in there, and they've got a clear idea of what I've been doing. Depending on your organisation, your manager or whoever's doing your review may not always know what you're doing day to day, so this is a really good opportunity to show them. And that way you can walk in there and they've got a clear idea of what you've been doing, so you can have a conversation around that as opposed to them saying, oh, you did this, 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 and you're like, hang on, that's not what I was doing this, and then there's those 3 other things that you haven't mentioned. So this is a really good opportunity for you to have that, make that a conversation as opposed to them kind of reviewing you.
How long is your review conversation normally? Hour? On an average, people think it's an hour, or does anyone have it less than an hour? Okay.
Who currently feels like their current process accurately reflects what they've been doing? Yeah, so not a lot of hands up there, so maybe that's something to think about is, will doing this help that reflect and showcase what I have been doing as opposed to just ticking the boxes and moving on?
So we're going to do an activity to do this template, but I'm thinking instead of that, what I want to hear from the crowd is, after listening to these, what is it you're going to go back and do differently? Is anyone going to try anything different?
Yeah, that's a really, really good one. So for those who couldn't hear, it was talking about keeping a running record of what you've been doing over the year. So maybe it's, you learnt a new tech stack. Maybe you sat down with someone that you hadn't sat down with before and worked with them. So, so it can be directly related to your job, or maybe it's extracurricular stuff, or maybe it's things above and beyond. Maybe it's cultural things. So, I encouraged people to come and have lunch once a week together because that way we get to gel as a team, and that's something that wasn't happening before. And they're all the little things that, after a couple of months you forget that was your idea, or you forget that thing even happened. So it's good to keep that running record.
Yeah?
Related to that, the evidence group, was collecting the evidence of those things as well, like getting regular live feedback and keeping that record somewhere.
Yeah.
A lot of people have said about you, how you could have improved, perhaps how you improved.
Yeah, that's really good. Again, it's like keeping the evidence. So something I like to do is, I've had people say to me like, oh, Kelly, you did a really great job on that. I'm like, awesome, thank you. Can you put that in an email? and quite often they do. So that's really nice. And again, it's that, feedback really quickly, face-to-face. But it's nice to, they just say that to you, in 8 months down the track, you're not going to remember that, oh, what was it that he said? I know he said something nice about me, but so you're right. It's really good to get evidence of those things as well. And people don't mind doing it for the most part. Sometimes they might seem a little bit like, huh?
Yep.
I have a question. I'm curious to hear what you all think about this one.
and they're like, oh, she's doing a good job, she'll, do well, and don't actually make it official, and your salary doesn't change, but the job description grows.
Yep.
And gets children of its own, so
Yep.
just
Yeah.
curious to hear what your experience has been in that area and any tips you might have around that.
I haven't had a lot of that happen to myself, but I've seen it where people are like all of a sudden doing 2-3 jobs, and it really affects their work-life balance. So I think that's one big sign that you need to raise it as an issue if it's affecting your work-life balance. So if you're suddenly doing 2 jobs, you're not doing that in the same 40 hours that you're working before. There's no way. And also another thing to think about is, do I have to wait to a review period to talk about this? Don't wait. Bring it up early, bring it up often. And if you have to bring it up with more and more people, then so be it. But that's a tough one. Did you have anything to add?
The way there are 2 ways I would do it. Yeah, firstly, I wouldn't wait until a review to try and do it. The second one would be, if you know what your interest is and what your priority is, I would shape that and just go and say, look, I've been doing these many things, and this is my understanding of the priority, and I'm going to focus on these things. How does that sound? And if there's a dispute in there, then you have a conversation. If there's no dispute, you've already closed the conversation by saying, this is what is my understanding of the priority, because you've already thought about it and gone into the conversation by preparing for it. Because for me, this happens a lot at the client side. You just get left, right, center, everything on your plate, and then you're like, hold on, what is the priority over here? And sometimes I'll let them decide, because I'm like, okay, I want them to decide on this, and sometimes I decide it myself and say, this is my understanding of the priority. Is this different from yours? If so, let's have a conversation about it.
So I think some of that stems back also to the first couple of activities we did around understanding the process, which means looking at the expectations of you. So have those expectations changed? And is everybody aware of what those expectations and the, kind of KPIs for the role or whatever else? So, if you walk into a review and they're still measuring you on the old stuff, but you're doing all this new stuff, there's going to be a really big disconnect.
And recapping those to say, in the last year, these were the things which were my objectives or my expectations or goals, and that's how I've been going versus what's the standard one which was given to you when you started. Anyone has any other questions?
I guess you talked a bit about the importance of data, when you've done these talks. So, a few of the organisations here probably aren't as transparent about how they pay their employees.
Yep.
So how much should we kind of be sharing with other people about
That's
our own compensation?
That's a tough one because, especially if it's coming down to pay, it can be people. There's still this caginess about it, and people feel quite that it's personal, so they may not want to share. But I know in some companies, people just share amongst themselves as well to give a bit of, so that they do have an idea. If your company isn't transparent, can you ask them to be? Is it just because they've never been asked to share that data, that's why they're not doing it? And also then it comes back to why we talked about the market analysis and looking outside your company, because a lot of companies don't share that, so you do need to look outside.
Also, some of them have clause in your contract that you can't share it, so be aware of what's in your contract, and do what you think is the right thing by reading your paperwork. The other thing is also, there's no harm in asking your manager itself, can you give me guidance on these levels? What's in our organization going? They may not publish it, but as an individual, they might give you guidance on it, because I've seen that. People just don't ask because they are shy, or it's cagey, or that's the topic, unspoken topic, and no one wants to talk about it. But I've noticed in this area, there is nothing in my experience that I've not got answers when I've tried to poke holes a little bit to try and get those answers, to say, okay, what's this, and why don't we have this information, or how can we get this information? And it's more about how you ask as well. It's not about, hey, tell me this, versus, okay, can I get some information around this area, and what is it that we need? Is there a reason why we can't share this information or get this information?
I think we're going to have to wrap up there.
Cool. So thank you, everyone. And this is the talk. This is the inside article we've written. There's a link to this, so when they share the deck, you can click on it and see. it's got the first part, and then we're going to share 2 more parts around this over a period of time. Cool. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Jaksha and Kelly. I really enjoyed being taken through that. I think in any sort of circumstance where I'm wanting to enter into a negotiation, feeling like I've got a structure around that conversation and some data points that I can use to not only convince myself, but also the person in front of me who I'm negotiating with is going to be extremely valuable. And obviously getting more sort of validation of those data points from people around you is going to be just improve the power and the quality of that. So bounce your story off somebody else before you go into it. Somebody that's been working with you for a period of time will have experience and may pick up on things that you haven't remembered. So do that. Okay, guys, it's afternoon tea time. Half an hour upstairs in the terrace area for refreshments, and we'll see you back later.